Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's great to be with you again today. I know this time of summer, we're still a little bit in vacation mode. I guess school started for those of you who have kids. And yeah, Heather, the teacher's crying this week. I am too, because we're not ready. But it's great to have you here this morning. Okay. Last week we kind of explored the general understanding of strengths. We looked at the idea behind that really strengths are designed to look at what's right with us instead of what's wrong with us. To be aware of our weaknesses, but really to invest in and build around our strengths. Okay, so you have your top 5. We talked about the 4 domains a little bit. I just handed out a little bit of a cheat sheet that we'll use today because today is really about working together. Okay, nobody wants to hear me talk for an hour, so we're going to be doing a lot of interaction today. And talking, you're laughing at me, Sharon. I heard that.
No, I'm just delighted to be here.
Giving you a hard time. Okay? So we'll refer to that quite a bit. Are there any questions this morning as we get started as it relates to anything we talked about last week? As you've had some time to think about this and process maybe your own top 5, are there any questions that myself or Mike could answer this morning?
It's a comment than a question,
Sure.
But it could be question. I get to watch all the video now on my strength. It's only 1 minute and 45 seconds or something, but it says so much about how to develop your strength and your strength and your strength. And then seems like I hear the Lord said, trust me with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In every way, acknowledge me, and I shall make your pathway straight, right? And I was a little baffled by it says, leaning on your strength, leaning on your strength. That's what I thought I heard when the video speak. So I had a little struggle.
Sure. Yeah. And I think we can all relate to that, Sharon. I would encourage you, you can check out those videos that Sharon did on Gallup's website about your strengths. And that tension between leaning into the Lord and being responsible for ourselves can be a little bit tricky sometimes. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit today. One of the things that's interesting is when you look at your strengths, and I'm not going to delve into this too much today, but and this is not from Gallup, this is from me, so you can, Gallup's off the hook on this one. But one of the things we find often is a lot of times our strengths, when we get tired or maybe when we are a little bit selfish, they can also have a shadow side. Okay, so I'll give you an example. So we'll take my number 5, harmony. Okay, Heather, you have harmonies. Anybody else? Hey, Benjamin. Anybody else have harmony here? Okay, so those of us who are in harmony, we like finding common ground. Okay, we like for everybody to get along. Even in our own lives, we like to kind of feel at peace quite a bit. But in my job, I'll give you an example. One of my roles at the university is I oversee our discipline process. Okay. So from a harmony perspective, how do you think that resonates with me? Right? When I've got to discipline a student or send one home and have that meeting, the anxiety level kind of ramps up a little bit. Okay? Because one of the things I know that if it's about me and my comfort, I can kind of slide into maybe not confronting the things that I should or dealing with conflict the way that I should. Okay, so harmony is great, but if I can there's a shadow side to it. Okay, that I have to be aware of as well. Does that make sense? Okay, and so I have to say what's best for the student, what's best for the institution, and then the way that I've managed that. Right, this is how it remains. Good morning. Remains a strength is if I suspend a student, I send them home for 3 days. What do you think I do when they come back? I'm grabbing coffee with them. How you doing? Okay, let's talk about the next steps forward. Does that make sense? Okay. So the point is to invest in our strengths, to be aware of some of the shadow sides, some of the weaknesses, but really to kind of utilize these in a way that's healthy and productive. All right. Here's some questions we kind of talked through that you may ask as you look at your strengths and we talk about serving in the body at Grace Community Church. What do I do best? Al's really good at this. Pat's great with financial advising. Okay, you tend to compare yourself to others. I told you last week, Josh McNall has been a friend of mine for over 30 years. And not just because he's one of my best friends, but Josh is a brilliant communicator. it's easy to start comparing yourself, especially in the body of Christ, to the people around you. And I think strengths gives us some language to talk about serving in a way that's good or that's unique to us. Okay, so how can I use my strength to serve the body? What are my unique contributions? How do I best connect and grow with Christ, with God, and with others? And then how can I learn to be aware and value what others are best at? I sat down with Mike even this morning to talk through little things, and it was so helpful because Mike in his strategic thinking has a much easier time kind of mapping things out and thinking through next steps and here's where we're going. And so I was able even this morning to sit down with Mike and say, Mike, I appreciate that about you. You know, he's really good at that. Okay, does that make sense? All right. So this is what we're going to do this morning to get us kind of mixing and talking. This is a fun exercise called mining for strengths. Do you mind passing these out? Okay. And what I like for you to do is to partner up. So if two of you, if there's an odd number, we can do 3. That's okay. Okay. And to get us started, would anybody be willing to kind of volunteer this morning to talk about your strengths a little bit? Benjamin? Okay. Okay, Benjamin's going to volunteer for us. I'll let Mike pass these out. Okay, but as he's doing that, I'm going to explain very briefly how this works. Okay? So if you all will do this on a scratch piece of paper, I think we've got some pens around too, Mike. They're right here.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Anybody need a pen?
Thank you.
Anybody else need a pen? So if on the back side of this, here's what we're going to do. Are you need another piece of paper or a pen?
No, pen.
Okay. Mind grabbing one mic. So on the back side of this, Ben's going to give us his top 5. Okay, so can you give us your top 5 strengths? Benjamin, sorry, you go by Benjamin.
Yes.
I go by that only when I'm in trouble. I told you that last week. So, okay. What are your top 5?
Ideation. Let me write it down.
Okay, so yeah, if you'll write those down, okay, just on the back of that piece of paper, write down his top 5.
And the second.
Ideation is number 1.
Number 2 is activator.
Activator.
Number 3 is input.
Input.
Number 4 is context.
Context is 4.
Number 5 is belief.
Okay. Now you've got your cheat sheet. Okay, so you can kind of look at definitions of those if you need to. Very quick definitions.
Are we supposed to write them down?
If you can, it's okay. It's all right. Well, the rest of us will cover it for you. Yeah, I think you're okay. Okay. This is not meant to just give you an example. All right. So what I want to do, Benjamin, is very briefly, if you can just share, maybe over the last couple of years. This is the homework I gave you last week, but to share a time that you kind of feel like you were firing all cylinders. It was your church history class or something where you kind of felt like you were on top of things and really were like, you were doing something you thought, yeah, I could keep doing this. I could do this for a long time.
Okay.
Do you have anything?
I have 3 things.
Okay, just let's go with 1 for now. Okay.
Well, you already mentioned the church history one in my church history class.
Okay. Can we go with that one? You okay with that?
I guess so.
Okay, and here's what we're going to do. As Benjamin's talking, okay, I want you to look at his top 5, okay? And I want you to see if you can hear where you hear those or one or more of those strengths for him. That make sense?
Well, a better one would probably be whenever I've been involved in whenever I've helped start a few Bible studies with friends, meeting houses, I would be kind of the main teaching part, just expanding on whatever we're talking about. And that's when, even though I jump around a lot, they would always say it was relevant. They were glad that people involved.
Okay. How'd you go about preparing for those?
What preparation?
Okay. Not much?
No, I ain't no Army Ranger here.
Okay. And what was it about those, Benjamin, that really kind of led to a sense of satisfaction or a sense of, kind of being in your sweet spot?
Well, part of it is, context is one of my strengths. And the Bible is not something that happened 100 years ago. It's something that happened 2,000 to 6,000 years ago.
Okay.
Belief is another one of my strengths, and that's where I get all my values. The majority of my values from is God's word. And then, ideation and activator, I can just start, and it will, I'll be carried by the current of my thoughts and inspiration or whatever till it seems to be almost wherever I need to be.
Second nature. Okay. All right, good. So as you look at his top 5, as you maybe look at these definitions, are there any examples of where you see maybe for Benjamin some of his top 5 in what he just shared? He kind of gave us some, to be honest. Okay. Okay.
He has.
Anybody want to share? Anybody have an idea?
Judge me. It's okay.
Not judgment. Okay. I see that, he mentioned it, that when you look at context, people who have high context are those who usually look to the past to make sense of the present. And so it makes sense that taking the history, the wisdom of Scripture from 2 to 6,000 years ago, as you talked about, and understanding, helping in a small group environment of how this matters for today. Okay, the Apostle Paul was not just some guy that lived 2,000 years ago, but his theology matters for us today. That's context. You see that? Ideation. What's that?
I was gonna say, you hear activator with I just got started.
Just want to
I
start.
didn't have to worry about planning.
Right? Yeah. It's people with high activator. Granted, just starting things. Okay. And whether that's a discussion or whatever that is, it's just kind of launching that. Okay. Anybody else? Does that make sense? Okay. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to find a partner. Okay. Or if there's an odd number, again, 3 of you, I want you to write each other's top 5 down. Okay. And then one at a time, that's what I want you to do, to share an experience of the last couple years or so where you felt that you were in the flow, that you were a part of something or doing something that you're like, yeah, this is significant. Okay. This is something that I feel energized by, that I felt comfortable doing, that there was a sense of, like I was made to do this. Okay. And then for the other person who's listening, I want you to try to identify at least one of their top 5 and where you saw that in what they shared. Okay. Does that make sense? And then we'll switch. After that, we'll kind of have the other person then share their experience. Okay. So I'll give you an example. One more. This is personal for me. Last night, we had a couple college students over, and my wife and I watched Hamilton with these college students. Any Hamilton fans in the room? Okay. I love Hamilton. The musical, I'm not usually a big musical guy, but the history, the philosophy behind the way Hamilton tended to see, America, things like the Constitution, and how he was able to make that relevant for the people in his time. I love kind of how the American people came together at that time around a certain set of ideas and values and working through conflict and navigating that, and how even things like for Hamilton, economics connected to things like education and things like politics, okay, that there was all these kind of connections building. I kind of watched that film last night. I was like, this is incredible, okay, and I felt a sense of energy from that, okay. Do you see any of my top 5? And even my experience watching Hamilton last night. What do you see? Intellection, right? This whole philosophy and why the Constitution is so big and yet it's so cool that how it matters on an individual level, okay? Right? Connectedness, like how economics is influenced politics, it influences education, how everything in society tends to be connected. There are no usually random events. It's everything exists for a reason. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
We work together.
Absolutely. Right.
Together.
Yeah. All right. Any questions on what we're doing here? So I'll give you a few minutes. Okay. Mike and I are around. If you have questions, we're happy to. You've got your cheat sheet, so I'm gonna let you kind of work together to hear from each other for a little bit. All right. I'll pull you back together in probably about 7, 8, 10 minutes. Okay. Yeah.
You're gonna find some Sharon? Pardon me? Oh, okay, Sharon can't write, so. Here, Lager. Maximizer. Partner. Learner. My bud.
So mine.
Responsibility.
This was a real activator. Not all fine. Not all fine.
So, Stacey, do you have an example where you were at your best? Something that just came very
You got your story? Oh, you are. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No rules.
I see achievers at work, but I was trying to compare with the other ones. I know that's why I could mainly for you. Just describe it in your own words, kind of like what energized you. I feel focused on this. I think you should make a social they work hard. It's just a great deal of skill. I feel like I do get tired of people, but everyone comments on I go it's kind of like someone tried to talk to me and I don't and I'm not being rude, but I don't want to talk. I need to work. That's it. So I definitely like that's it. So that's where I see the shift. Because ideation is like brainstorming. Coming up with I see that at work as well. Blowing in the moment. Sometimes this will give me tasks.
I think that's the reason I ended up burning
Part of quality control. It's not like on my control.
I think the third time
I do that before I start. Then I feel I'm supposed to. Even though it sounds like strength, I don't see you could just the more I think about it, I see strategic. I don't get to do much. Of course, I say that, but I've gone to Jesus' office and make suggestions about so I guess there's strategy. And I also do well, it doesn't work out, try these. It's not like you take something and you want it to make the dreaming part of impacting that's part of the futuristic part. The futuristic to the
Kind of interesting how that communication kind of
they're great at like communicating vision or
That's so much.
What do you
So I guess that's.
Well, I think you have much more like so. I mean, it sounds like the situation you're in. May not right? It's like actual users. How do we make this better? Yeah, I mean, I think really interesting. All parts are not. I don't love it. They're not, but I think if they're not as much productive.
It depends on the game. Some games, some of them, yeah.
So, stuff like recognize how from I can do that. And I also like when do you focus on partner on somebody who's kind of analytical, responsible, whatever. It's just gonna like, okay, this is take that and work out. It's gonna sit there and figure out, okay, well, what's actually making this thing stick? It's gonna get in there really because you're gonna want to be in the data. That's gonna be really and you can do it with like whatever time so that's actually cool. And I think it's really interesting that you have the data. Those are kind of that section is probably uncommon.
I know people that are, something like that.
About 5 or 6 more minutes, okay?
Yes.
I think one of the I like getting it early, put on the trip. I like being in the early process to figure out, okay, we've got an issue, let's start planning it out or figuring out like something, how can we impact this group? And one of the things that happened during shut down for a while, very slow at first and shut down. So it meant going back to the garage and ask for what is like things like
Really feel good thing because
I didn't mean that. So 4 or 5. That's like kind of going back to maybe
positive feedback. Actually, been listening to the Bible. Positive feedback
you know, we have
is one of mine, so obviously
describe what's like which
mixing strengths and
but I count 4, there's 4 different colors. So so I think it is
So being able to get in there and say, okay, I can figure out and say, taking a whole bunch of different
I know purple.
okay, we've got all these different types of people, we have all these different
That's the only one I know for sure.
oh yeah, Phillips.
and like
Phillips.
how to make this flow like
Purple
maybe
and
just
silver.
opportunities for correspondence kind of things. So like the flow kind of
Purple is
that's the time like to be a combination of those things. It's like, and then execute
that's the blue.
so those kind of tend to be my two wheelhouses.
I didn't ask.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
That's what you do.
Maximize it.
Blue as well. We don't have a team.
Yeah.
We want to know what blue is.
So the blue is the relationship.
Responsibility.
Relational.
Kind of.
Yeah. So purple is you're executing. And I guess the idea is the green is your strategic thinking, and then the orange is the inheritance. Yes,
Okay, so execute is purple.
Oh, not that. I cannot start.
I watch relationship, big picture, strategic policy, trying to be strategic part, and connecting this is a lot of big figuring out how to structure and what's the damage
Trying to be getting
that figuring out when I use those two when I'm getting into attention levels, individualization, later, so actually,
Sometimes that's interesting how it's scored.
If she can remember what she ate on the trip,
to get in. Your strengths are you're excited to talk about.
That's my greatest.
So I usually have big pictures too.
I'm an expert.
I like
All right, about another minute, okay? I'll be sensitive to time, so I'll give you about another minute. I love the conversation taking place. It'll give you another minute or so.
Yeah, I like to randomly learn.
I learned to sound.
So that's
It's experience.
I like
There's Tim's gonna be-
The thing,
so you're asking for the maximizer. But yeah, there's so and now I've learned I like to go always.
well, I don't know if you've ever heard of Rotz. It's a boat town, something, muddy water from Viking days.
Okay.
They do the manifest.
Yeah.
They do the
Start to notice.
So we'll kind of wrap things up here for this part.
Years of history.
Okay.
Of course, we got here.
Good conversation around the table. It's helpful.
In
All
Oklahoma.
right. I'll give you an example of something I learned from Shelly. Okay, Shelly wasn't here last week, but she's here this week. One of Shelly's strengths is positivity, and one of amen, right, Shannon? You got positivity. Okay, so Shelly was talking about putting together a fundraiser. Okay, to help raise some money for some victims in the community, and it came time for the fundraiser to go off outside, and the weather was bad, and the sound system didn't work right, and they didn't have electricity, they didn't have a microphone, and the entire time Shelly's talking about this, she has this giant smile on her face. And it's not that she ignored the problems or acted like they didn't exist, but people with positivity usually have this contagious energy to say, it's gonna be okay, okay? And so that was her, she's like, look, this is not ideal, but we're gonna get through it, okay? We're gonna make this thing happen. And the entire time she's talking about, she has this giant smile on her face. Okay? Positivity, right?
It didn't happen.
It did happen, and she did a
It
fantastic
was
job.
contagious, like her positivity.
Absolutely.
It was radiating.
Yeah.
It was neat.
Yeah. Okay. I get that from you, Sharon. You're positive.
I'm
Like, you're kind of like right in this room, and we feed off of that. I think that's really neat.
And I got a blood, it's all positive.
Go ahead, Pat.
No, I was gonna say, she put positivity with Lou.
Yeah. Yeah. Draws everybody.
Everywhere.
Is there one other example? I want to be sensitive to time, but any other example that somebody would like to share from something they learned, or an example of a strength in action, as you were talking this morning?
Well, I think one thing from listening to Pat's story was, you know, it's a event that was very positive to him. Basically, hit on all five strengths.
Yep.
So it wasn't just like it was one or two. It's
Sure, absolutely.
a function of all of them.
Yeah, we were talking back here that these strengths are themes. So you have a definition on a piece of paper, but the reality is they're sort of nuanced by probably your other top 5, top 10, top 12 strengths. And so positivity may look a little bit different. And so it's fun to explore those because you will see all 5. And you'll see them in different places. At work it may appear this way, or at home it may, and they're more themes to explore rather than these kind of fixed definitions to look for all the time. Okay, good. So this is the last thing I want to do today. I want to really kind of get this specific to strengths. Okay, so I'm going to have you. If we need to move around a little bit, we can. I want this to be specific to Grace Community Church. I'd like you to find, again, a partner, okay, somebody to talk to, or if there's 3 of you, but let's switch it up. Let's find some different people to talk to this time. And this is what I want to do. It's sort of the same, okay? So you'll write your top 5 down on a piece of paper on the back side of that, what I gave you. I've got some more up here if you need it. But this is how I want to frame this. We're looking in context here, okay? We're looking not just about generally, but we're talking about what does this mean for me at Grace Community Church in 2021? So what I like to do is share your top 5, and then for each person to share, look, this is what I'm interested, this is how I'm interested in serving at Grace. Maybe that's leading a small group. Maybe that's working in the kids ministry, okay? Maybe that's teaching or facilitating something like this. Maybe it's volunteering somehow. Maybe it's working with people who are in the hospital and need people to visit them, okay? There are all sorts of ways that I know Mike and the team here would love to get you involved and invested in Grace Community Church. So the question is, here's what I'm interested in. And then the feedback is, here's how I see maybe at least one of those strengths, how it can be utilized in that particular role. Does that make sense? Okay. I love doing stuff like this. Okay, I'm certified in Gallup Strengths, but can you see my top 5 and what I'm doing? Absolutely. I get energy from this. I'll go home, and I'm an introvert by nature, but I'll go home and tell Sarah about, I learned this from Sharon and Shelly and Al, and because I love, right, bringing people together, connecting, talking about like what you're good at, and it's really fun for me, okay? So does that make sense? So we're talking about, you're sharing your top 5 strengths, and then you're talking about, here's where I'm interested in serving at Grace, and then some feedback on, here's so I can see 1 or 2 of those strengths really being an asset for you in what you're interested in doing at Grace, okay? Any questions on that? Okay, again, Mike and I are here to help facilitate if you have questions or needs. And then when we're done, I'll pull Mike up and he'll give us some next steps. Okay, so we'll give you about 10 or 15 minutes to work through this. And go, okay?
Feel free to switch
Yeah, move around, move tables, switch around a little bit.
Find somebody different you want to.
Okay.
I might move over here. Grab a ramp, basically. Yeah, I would love to talk to you.
You didn't move on. I live over here. I'm Jean. I'm Debbie.
So where are you?
Sure.
So what's the
Nobody else
what do you see like for yourself?
So there's a lot of
Join this table?
I have mine for the next season. There's a lot of people either planning for retirement or
We don't have as harmony in this building. Whatever we do, we apparently have to do it together. I told him I do
and so
fundraising.
I want
I do try to go to
So I've been in the early kind of doing that, especially when you're doing this movie, building cameras. I do have to show one stuff. I don't know.
I went to first lesson.
I like your business.
For about 10 years.
I get a lot of but then I guess it's the easiest part. I know exactly what I want to give it out.
I did that.
In my case, and what I'm doing is just by being a priority. That kind of stuff. Yeah, along the way. Yeah, So I've got a friend, he's got our strategic helping capture something and they were looking at a lot of operations. And a couple of those churches didn't work out.
You definitely do a lot more for the amount of
But
money.
rather than saying,
it's like, oh, where I was, I didn't think I could trust you.
changing their plan, but still kept Yes, exactly. And they're able to adjust as they and yet especially kind of financial. We work with
how that like I can see like so you got related plans you I think there's like no one there's like someone wants to be fair like I said, you know, you
I know what responsibilities. I know I can figure out right? You might be just if I know what you expect.
okay, I have a I want to make sure that make sure I so when my partner your top 5 ago, I have responsibility.
dropped a little bit.
So you've got everything. So you're trying to figure out, okay, if I don't know, how do I? You get I don't know the big season picture.
But I realized there's a lot of how I work.
You got this internal drive, right? You want to do well, right? You got this big picture thinking that once you have an idea where things are going, you'll be able to get there. If there's no people, it makes it difficult to answer how you can be your best.
I think that's the key part of it. You see, so I think that, it sounds like for you, just to degree, so, like, you want to get in there with people, like, creating an avenue for that.
I would be responsible.
I like doing the strategic side to get there. Like strategic and activity, like the big picture, how we get
So even a conversation with your leads, like, look, I'm
creating an avenue for it. I want to people that want to take it out.
I want you to know I'm really committed to this.
I'm already like us doing the strengths class is already a way for me starting to pockets of change. Because I think people also need to it's just tricky.
But your job is to figure out people that want to do something, to be able to connect with them, to be able to kind of find the best talent.
I've been that where I worked here.
For you, probably about the flowers.
My kids were a lot of so I was doing a lot of
I see that. People who had connected with us, like Enthroned, Cincinnati, Marquis Studies,
and I always felt like
showing some kind of psychology of others' reputation, and people with connections with them.
I'm working on my emails.
So you might take an interest in if there's something else he's passionate about, or my own church is actually
it's like, well, this is what it is. We'll do it for each other. Everything connected. I want to, but
find areas that he's
trying to lots of stuff here. It's like, we got to go sort of coaches stuff.
I don't even know who like that.
Rejuvenated and creating some avenues. I think we might be able to.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, couple more minutes, okay?
My grandchildren are starting to want to go.
So like you've already got it.
One of those that comes in the retirement transition. At the outside, so I can somebody, there's some guy that try to get a person to read
I think we can easily do a class for me, there's always interested in that resolution. Now I have this shows up.
All right, let's try to wrap this up. I love the conversation. I want to be here since a good time?
I will, that's exciting.
Okay, cool.
I'm on one.
Okay. Kind of like last time, is there anybody who might be willing to share about all right, anybody who'd be willing to share real quick, maybe somebody that you talk to that you're like, wow, we could really see their strengths connecting in the church in this particular way.
Can I answer that in a different perspective?
Absolutely.
So I was visiting with Al. Al and I are both relatively new
Okay.
to Grace.
Sure.
So I think workforce searching for where those areas are,
Absolutely.
then definitely like
And I would say that's probably true for a lot of us here. Okay. I think strengths gives us a chance to kind of explore some of those things. Okay. So I don't know if anybody else was like that around your tables, but I think that's a great point.
yeah, it's kind of like again, I think coming from different longtime members of different churches.
Sure.
How does this work here?
Yeah.
It's kind of
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think Mike and Mike will jump up here in a minute. I think we'd love to have some more of those conversations. I think that's a great place to start. Great place. Anybody else? Heather.
Can you reword your question? I didn't catch it.
Yeah, it's just you want to share. I mean, something that you learned in that last conversation of like I could really see this person's strength serving in the church. How this will help them in what they're interested in doing.
I like how Taylor pointed out some of hers, and then she said that Dale has asked her to help with some of the new building and some of the just different aspects of it, and from a parent standpoint, some of her strengths play into that.
Okay.
It's just to me, I think it's fun how other people can see. I think even before we can recognize our strengths sometimes, or what we could be good at, someone else could see how that could be used.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Do you all see how your strengths start to overlap too?
yeah.
Right? Because you kind of like, I see it. And that's, again, as I've shared, there are themes. John and I were talking about this a little bit. It's not this fixed definition that you gotta abide by. I mean, like, so these guys both have strategic, and I'll get you together because probably strategic for them looks very different. There's some overlap, but there's also a lot of freedom to be able to explore, right? What these look like in your job, in parenting, or in marriage, or at church, and there are themes to explore. Okay, good. Sharon.
Yeah, I wanted to share because I heard the story of James and Helen back there.
Yeah.
I never heard from someone like that before. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to get to meet wonderful people like that. They are serving in a correction, kind of like a group of people. But then I really feel like they get their high in serving the wounded, outcast, lonely, or afraid people.
Wow.
And Helen said some of the people never dreamed anybody would be interested to talk to them, but they do. And she is a caseworker or something. And I was just mesmerized because I never have any experience like that. And get to hear other people using their strength in their jobs, and they getting a high. It's almost like they're going to work, but they get paid for it. So that's pretty amazing to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really cool that when we can kind of see our strengths in action, it boosts our own sense of well-being, but the research says it also makes us more productive, okay, and better reading. So James and Helen, thank you for what you're doing. That's incredible. And I love to see that you're using your strengths in that capacity there. That's really, really neat. I'm going to have Mike come up because we're going to talk about some next steps. So it's like, well, we've kind of explored strengths. And as we mentioned, there's some opportunities that if you would like to sit down with Mike or me to look at your top 5, whether that's job transition or whether that's serving at Grace or whether that's, whatever it may be, we're happy to do that, okay? And Mike's also wants to talk more about kind of getting involved more in Grace Community Church. So I'm going to turn over to Mike, and then I'll hang around after. I think Mike will too if there's any questions that you have. But he'll give us some next steps. Okay.
Yeah,